Ernest Hemingway is known as one of the most influential American authors of the 20th century, with disciples such as George Saunders, Ray Bradbury, and Norman Mailer. Most of his novels have been highly praised, not to mention his masterful short stories that make effective use of his iceberg theory. He was inspired by his mother's lessons in music, particularly the way Bach used repetition and counterpoints. He's a Pulitzer Prize-winning Nobel laureate of literature who needs no introduction, but I feel the torrents of spring rising, which means it's time to ask the question, who is Ernest Hemingway? Ernest was born on July 21st, 1899, and came from a deeply religious family in the suburbs of Chicago. A lot of ink has been spilled over Hemingway's lesser portrayal of women, at least compared to the complex men he writes about. A lot of this seems to stem, in part, from issues with his mother. She was not much of a homemaker, leaving his father to do more domestic work. She dressed Ernest and his sister in the same exact clothes at a young age. Twinning them, he grew to hate his sister and mother, blaming his mother for the suicide of his father. As he grew older, he was pushed by two teachers to work on his writing, with Fanny Biggs teaching him short fiction. She also taught him in a journalism class, which she ran as a small newsroom. He earned an apprenticeship at the Kansas City Star, where he began to drink and fall in love. Pete Wellington at the Kansas City Star introduced him to the paper's house style, giving him 110 directives that Hemingway said were the best rules I've ever learned for the business of writing. I've never forgotten them. Unable to join the military for World War I due to his poor eyesight, he joined the Red Cross to become an ambulance driver. During his time in Italy as an ambulance driver, he became more self-centered and also suffered his first serious head injury. Upon returning, he soon started work as a reporter at the Toronto Star. In Chicago, he became friends with Sherwood Anderson, a great influence to Hemingway. Anderson recommended that Hemingway move to Paris to enjoy the literary scene and begin his writing career, introducing him to Ezra Pound and Gertrude Stein. Here he became friends with writers such as John Dos Passos, James Joyce, and F. Scott Fitzgerald, all writers of the so-called Lost Generation. This term was used to describe not only the dead from World War I, but also to describe the aimless grieving survivors of the Great War. Unfortunately, due to Ernest's lifestyle, he began suffering more head injuries from the sports he played. These head injuries caused his behavior to become more erratic. Paris is where he earned the moniker Papa, as he always called young women daughter. Although charming and cordial, he had a nasty streak of self-centeredness too. Ernest was never able to take criticism well, all throughout his career, no matter how light it was. This ruined many of his relationships with his former friends. His self-centeredness also ended 3 of his 4 marriages. Never a man without a woman. First, he married Hadley Richardson, whom he was with until he met the wealthy Pauline Pfeiffer, his second wife. They were together until he met fellow author Martha Gellhorn. While he was married to her, he met his 4th wife, Mary Welch. When he got into a crash while in London, while he was reporting on World War II, he suffered subdural hematoma, but was never treated for it because doing so would undo the mythology he crafted for himself. Instead of resting or stopping his drinking, he continued his lifestyle full force. The constant lifelong trauma to his head severely affected his performance, not only in bed, but his ability to speak and his ability to write as well. As he suffered more and more through the years, he became paranoid and began making up outrageous lies about his life, including war stories about World War I and World War II, and also firmly believed the FBI was watching him closely. After a lifetime full of masculine adventure, traveling around the world, whether it was in Kenya, Spain, France, Cuba, or China, at the end of his life, Ernest moved to Ketchum, Idaho. While his delusions became worse, he began taking electroshock therapy for treatment, which affected his memory and his ability to write. Mary, his wife at the time, took Ernest out of the hospital because he couldn't tolerate treatment anymore. Feeling isolated from all the things he loved and depressed about being unable to write, he took his life at nearly 62 years old on July 2nd, 1961. It's a tragedy to see the way Ernest's life wasted away at the end of his life, and a tragedy for American literature. Who knows what could have come from him if he had allowed himself time to recover every time he hit his head? What great works have we missed out on? The mythology of Hemingway does a great disservice to the complex artist's reality. The man's man persona that he affected does not reveal the whole story, particularly his gender curiosity and gender play. By reading his body of work, I hope to better understand the interiority of this man. We'll explore his thoughts on love, war, life and death, men and women, and the complex nature of gender in his own life and work. If you'd like to see more of this kind of content, let me know which Hemingway short story or novel is your favorite. See you next time when the sun also rises.